Headphones, yet again. I speak about them too much. I listen to them quite a lot. I compare them more than I should. And my explanation is that during COVID-19 I've had more time on my hands, so therefore I'm off the hook. I should be allowed to have all this extra time, when really I would be doing this anyway, even if I was living and working a normal life. So there is no excuse. I'm obsessed with headphones, and I've been subject to a bit of gear acquisition syndrome, and a little bit of an addiction to good sound. But if I zoom out, there's a lot of other people around the world who are checking in on the internet all the time to discuss these things. There's also people in the market for new headphones, and they're learning about stuff. There's also a hobby, audiophilia, the audiophiles among us, who are into this kind of conversation and discussion. So I've lined up these headphones from my favorite sound, which is the top priority, but also there's every now and then, as you get further down the list, practicality starts to come into it as well. So it's basically my headphones that I own in order of favorite to least favorite. It goes like this. At the top of the list is the Focal Utopia. It is the best sounding headphone I have. It's an open, high-end, blockbuster sounding headphone. It's just tuned brilliantly. Some people say it's a bit low on the bass, but I've got an amp now which allows me to boost whatever I want. I still don't. When I compare this to other headphones, it just comes up favorably in pretty much all cases. Even if I like some elements of other headphones more, I find that the Focal Utopia just beats in more categories than any other headphone I own. Now, it's an expensive headphone. I picked it up secondhand for 3,500 Australian. So you'd think you get what you pay for. Maybe in this case, that's one of those things. Some people say they're overpriced. I do think they might be overpriced because of the law of diminishing returns, but they are very well built and they sound absolutely stunning. Next on the list, the Sennheiser HD600. I've got to say, that's my favorite headphone, probably for monitoring mixes with, plus a very, very pleasurable sound to listen to. I have a friend who has a 650, the HD650s. These are seen to be technically a higher end headphone. I prefer the sound of the HD600. I think that the detail on the top end and the bass being a little bit more neutral is more to my taste. Doesn't sound as extended or slightly less open sounding than the Focal Utopia, but it is probably one of the most reliable sounding headphones in terms of knowing what a mix translates to for a headphone mix anyway. Next up, and this is a really, really amazing third place here. I think I've got to give this company and this headphone model massive credit, but it's the Oppo PM3, planar magnetic, closed back, portable headphone. The reason it scores so high is because the sound is just absolutely awesome. It's got more bass than the Focal Utopia or the HD600, for, you know, want of a better description. It's sort of a weightier, more planar magnetic style bass, as is expected, but it really does have that. It is a little more cloudy, less clear in terms of bass, but it does give you that cushy, intimate, very involved in the music sort of sound. Comfortable to wear, You do feel it a bit on the top of your head when you're wearing it, because it is slightly heavy for a portable headphone. It's a lot heavier than the HD600, but the cable length on the short cable, just the sleekness, the small size of them, and the amazing sound. Brilliant sounding headphones. Here's another amazing thing I found the other day. To my ears, they sound different if I have the ear cups opened to click, 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 click 5, or if I go 1 more to 6 on each side, so that the ear cups are a little further down in the ears. They sound slightly different to my ears. Now, I think that's because if you're listening to, you know, a tweeter on a speaker or the center of a cone, for instance, if we're miking up a guitar cabinet where the microphone sits on axis to the cone, off axis to the cone, or further back, off axis, further back, that is going to affect the sound of the headphone in a massive way to the listener, perception-wise. Now, that's effectively, a microphone is effectively like an ear with its own frequency response. So, you know, if your ear is changed in terms of distance, position, angle to any transducer, speaker, driver, you are going to perceive a different type of sonic picture. You might get more or less bass, you might get more width, you might get more clarity. I found that for me, if I open them up to the 6 sort of clicks down on both sides, best compromise between staying on the head, feeling good, and best optimized sound for that particular pair of headphones. The Oppo PM3, can't recommend them high enough. Unfortunately, they don't make them anymore. I'm even thinking about getting a second pair just as a backup pair to use for spare parts. They also make a snazzy white and red version, so I was thinking of just getting a pair for my girlfriend. Next on the list is an IEM. Now, this is the Pro IEM that I use for my music touring work. It's the Shure 846. I've had custom molds before with in-ear monitors, IEMs, and the Shure 846 is just the best sounding universal fit with the best sound isolation. I don't believe that more drivers always make a better tuning of an EQ. I don't believe they give you more pleasurable sound. This has got 4 balanced armature drivers in it, different from the planar magnetic style of driver or the dynamic driver. This is a different type. A lot of the high-end IEMs have this style of driver. The Shure 846, it's built like a tank. That's why I like it. It's if you're going to be talking IEMs, portability is part of what you might be looking for. And Shure 846 is just a brilliantly tuned driver, or brilliantly tuned set of drivers per side. I did have when I bought them, I actually got them second hand. The filter, they come with 3 filters. The 3 filters give you a boost at 2.5 dB or minus 2.5 dB at a certain frequency. It might be 5K or something. I'm not sure exactly where it is. It might be 8K. Anyway, I find that the neutral filters are they're the stock filter sound that Shure recommends, obviously. That's the one they ship with. It's the best sound in terms of the ones I've tried. The brighter sound might be cool for certain listening styles or for certain tips that you put on them, because, by the way, whether you put the foam tips, whether you have the little silicon tips, whether you have those little tree-looking 3 things that block out even more noise, all of those different tip types and your ear size, that is going to change the sound even for the same listener on the same pair of any IEM. If they're universal fit. And if you've got custom IEMs, if you've got a really, really good seal, that's going to change the sound. I have also noticed if your mouth is closed or mouth is open, there is literally a change in sound in terms of the sort of the amount of open cavity in your head, and that actually does, I can tell the change of more resonance going around in a more open part of your head. It affects the additive sound that's coming out of there, also going into where the ears are hearing the sound from the IEM. So that's one of the things people might shy away from, those movements in the head, movements in the jaw, affecting the sound in a good or bad way. The sensation of things in people's ears. People don't go for that all the time. One good thing about IEMs, you can wear them with sunglasses without having to change any setup. You don't have to put the sunglasses on some weird angle. They're super portable. These are better built than pretty much any IEM I've used, and I haven't used that many, but I've used a lot of earbuds, and they're almost like the best cross-section of high-end sound and ultimate workhorse. And I've been using them for all of my on-stage shows since I started using, well, not since I started using in-ear monitors on stage. I used JH16s for a good amount of time. I will get to that. So we've had Focal Utopia at the top, HD600 by Sennheiser below that, Oppo PM3 below that, the Shure 846 Universal Fit IEMs below that. What's next on the list? Well, this was a surprise because I had them repadded, and it's not just because they're a new repad and there's a sense of newness. It's because the sound rocks. Bizarre to say this. HD25 by Sennheiser. On-ear, clampy, broadcast mainstays, these things. You see field recorders, people on TV shows using the boom arm, using these things all the time. Well built. All parts are obviously replaceable. Now, how's the sound? The sound is not as neutral as probably the HD600s, the Focal Utopia, even the Shure 846 maybe, the Oppo PM3 even. It's not even as neutral as other ones I've got on the list, but it is just the most isolated on-ear experience. I was really amazed after putting on other ones that isolate a lot of sound out from the outside world. These being on ear with these specific type of pads you've got blocks out amazing amounts of sound from the outside world. I can see now why broadcast people, to monitor their input levels so they're not hearing any distortion. They're often in the field, there's often cars and mechanical noise and generators and all sorts of stuff. All sorts of machines and hums and hisses and all sorts of stuff going on. The sound of outdoor people, crowds, beaches, waves, wind, everything. This pair of headphones is going to enable you to hear everything just coming into your ears and nothing from the outside world. So you can just hear whatever the mics are picking up or whatever the song or whatever the track you're listening to. It'd be great for editing. Sound is great. Really, really accentuated bass on a lot of levels for a driver this size. Much more detailed than a lot of headphones you're going to find. Very bright. People say that it's a U-shaped sound, as in it's accentuating the treble and bass. I do agree with that, but I think it's done in a tasteful way. Some people refer to that sound as almost a fun listening experience. I think that's a hard way to describe headphone listening. I do see what they mean more when I listen to the HD25s versus a lot of very neutral sounding headphones. But the amazing thing about the HD25, and they were made more than 30 years ago, this exact type. And so they've obviously settled on a serious standard in terms of let's just keep making these because people are getting a lot out of it. But got to say the HD25 is it's just really, really good. It's portable, it's easy to take around. In a way, for your portables, you're choosing between your Oppo PM3 closed, HD25 closed. If you want a more inside and not listening to the outside world, HD25s are going to actually take the cake for that. If you want a little more classy, pillowy, larger sound, Oppo PM3 probably take the cake for that. Next down is another Sennheiser can. It's the HD300 Pro. Now, we're starting to get into a point where I can sort of start to, instead of just saying that sounds great, because the top 5, Focal Utopia, HD600, Oppo PM3, Shure 846, HD25, they're all just like, to me, they're in that sounds great category. When we get into the HD300 Pro, we're starting to get into stuff that has quirks. Stuff that I can't really say is even listening in an isolated place. As in, I haven't listened to any other headphones to compare, and then I just put these things on a week later. I can already start to pick some holes in what I don't like about the sound. Everything from here on in, unfortunately, is going to have some element of that. And there's probably about 8 or 9 more headphones on this list still. So, HD300 Pro, they, to me, stand up. I can't say I like listening to them more than the HD25s by Sennheiser, but I can say that they are probably, in terms of being more comfortable than the HD25s, and they're an over-ear can, and they prioritize the vocals. For tracking vocals, they are a great choice. They are basically a successor to the HD 280s, or the 280 Pros, I think they were called, which are nowhere seen as the high-end can, but HD 300s, they are better built. They sound a lot better when I compared the two, and they are one of those isolating, comfortable, middle-of-the-road, tracking studio cans that can be thrown around. They've just got that hard plastic feel that you see in studios more. Even more workhorse than the HD25 in a lot of ways. And the sound, because it doesn't give you that detail and that bass, it's giving you the intelligibility of the vocal. So if you want, the ohmage of them means you can turn them up loud when you're tracking. You can get vocal to be the priority in your monitor mix when you're going to sing. We're using these. They're the ideal vocal tracking can. Next on the list is, now this is a little bit, this should be higher up, but the Beyerdynamic DT880, and this is the premium model, 250 ohm. The reason I didn't put these higher up, because they sound more balanced in terms of the way that instruments come across to my ears once I've adjusted to them. The problem is adjusting to them. Everything else that I've mentioned here has some more bass, some more treble than the next one, but they're still more in a ballpark than a lot of the Beyerdynamic school of thought sonic signature cans. I've always found them bright to the point that I could pick out the brightness being a problem in an isolated instance. I love the way they sound after you've listened to them for a while. I do have the Pro version of these, which has a curly cord, and also they clamp a little bit more on the head, and that does change the sound, by the way, a little bit as well. That actually helps fill out the mids, the perceived mids to my ears with that set of cans. But with these DT880 premiums, which have the longer cable, longer straight cable, more of a sort of audiophile home listening, premium is a good word for them. It is that, it's almost like there's a tilt EQ, where tilt EQs is something where from a normal thing you'd have a corner frequency and everything you boost in the treble you're pulling out of the bass. These don't have a lack of bass, but they also don't have this U-shaped thing. It's almost like there's been a tilt EQ applied to some sort of level, just in terms of the way these things reproduce sound. They just have so much just treble boost that I've always found that something that's a little it's too different from the school of other cans that I've got. Is that the final word? Maybe they're the only ones, you know, that are correct to listen to, and maybe all the other ones are too dull. I'm not sure. But when I take the DT880 premiums, which are semi-open, and put on a thing like the HD600s, no contest. It's not no contest, it's close-ish. But HD600s always seem to edge the DT880s out for an open, semi-open can. And when I put the Focal Utopia, people say they're bright. Well, I'll tell you what, they're a lot more reined in on the highs in a much more musical way than the DT880 to my ears. And you also get the benefit of more chunky mids and a more controlled extended bass. So, you know, I'm comparing semi-opens to opens, but they still go far down the list because that tuning being so trebly literally loses them place after place after place on this list, unfortunately, to my ears only. Next on the list is another Bayer dynamic, the DT770 Pro. Now these have a bit more bass than the DT880s, obviously, and they're closed, so they're good for tracking as well. I have tracked a lot with these, but even my own voice, which is one of those things that you sort of, if you've recorded singing a lot, you do get to know. And again, the vocal doesn't sound what reminds me of my own voice in a space like a room, a normal room without a lot of different anomalies, standing waves, ringing frequencies. The way my voice just sounds normally, the HD300 Pros for tracking, vocal, singing, speaking, they remind me more of what my voice sounds in a space than the EQ of my voice in the DT770 Pros. They're seen as a studio headphone. Some people like to listen to things on them. An interesting story was I took these DT770 Pros up to JB Hi-Fi here in Sydney, and I listened to some Sony WH-1000 Mark IIIs, those noise cancelling ones, and the Bose noise cancelling ones. I still preferred the sound of the DT770s when they were just wired to my iPhone versus the Bluetooth connection that these high-end noise cancelling, active noise cancelling Bluetooth cans were sonically. So that's still saying something. All of the cans here are still beating out those high-end consumer active noise cancelling in terms of just sonic quality. So to my ears, that's what I was hearing when I was ABC, doing those a bunch of times. Still, on this list, they're pretty far down there because they make instruments in a mix that I know well sound not in balance with each other in terms of sort of their what's being prioritized frequency-wise, even as well as the DT880s, which do it very well. And the tuning still has that Bayer Dynamic School house sound where there's that insane brightness, which unfortunately it doesn't go well with the way I want to hear, you know, a neutral, balanced mix of whatever style of music I'm listening to. I just haven't got used to listening to things in that way, And because I've got so many other examples of other headphones to compare them against, they do seem to stand out in that way, and they're a little bit of they're out on their own, and I'm not sure whether I think that's a good thing. But that said, Beyerdynamic, they make amazing stuff, and I have tried the DT1990 Pros, and they, I think, are an open back can. They sound absolutely stellar, and they almost convert, they land the somersault of being super bright, super detailed, having that low end there, and they're the ones that land the somersault. The other thing about those is they are built so beautifully. I think they beat everything else out on this entire list. Just a work of art in terms of the way that they're built. Next on the list is a Superlux 662F. Now this is a headphone I bought for $49 Australian at a rehearsal studio when I just needed a pair of cans because another pair of headphones wasn't working for a specific gig I was doing. They just, I know they're a copy of an AKG body, at least, or the design. It's pretty much copied off of the 702 or the 701 style headphone. So it really, it's going to have some of the attributes, maybe physically, that some of those headphones have. I know. So I was talking about the Superlux 662F. I just got a phone call, so the video got cut off, so this is following that up. Anyway, as I said, they sound great, and they were $49. So if you can notice now, I'm getting into the parts of this list which I'm having to bring in other factors like their value for money, and because they don't sound like, right off the bat I can say that there's something missing in terms of the way they sound. When I'm talking about the Focal Utopia, HD600, Oppo PM3, Shure 846, HD25, they're all above a certain level of echelon of quality in terms of how good they sound to me, that I just go, wow, that's great. Then you get to HD300 Pro, great for tracking vocal, DT880 Premium, very balanced if you were listening to mixes, not as good as the HD600, but they've got that brightness which brings them down. DT770 Pro, just a closed, not as good version of the 880 Premium, and still has that house sound brightness. Superlux 662F, cheap headphone, great bang for buck, but now I'm starting to have to talk about things like bang for buck. $49, punches so far above its weight, why not? Get some Superlux stuff. They are really, really easy to just test out because you only need $50 to check them out, and it just sounds to me like a good quality studio headphone. And it's the type of headphone that I used to just see in every studio, and the low end Audio Technicas, the low end Fostexes, the low end Sennheisers, and even just the cheapies that you'd see a studio buy 10 pairs of, and people would just leave them all over the floor. It's not because it's cheap, they just, to me, sound unfortunately a little bit like that to me. They don't really give you the amazing detail, they don't give you amazing isolation, they don't give you amazing bass, they don't prioritize the vocals, they don't showcase the instruments in any sort of flattering way at all. I will say the Superlux 662F is firmly in the studio monitoring headphone world though. It's robust, and it is just a standard, it's just a very boringly good representation of the sound, and that's all you're getting. And it's just further down the list for me. It's probably the last, well, it is on this list, it's the last over-ear large headphone on this list. So it comes last in that kind of category. Funnily enough, I bet if I was listening to these versus a $400 or $300 pair of Bose or the Sonys, you'd lose out massively in terms of function, portability, Bluetooth, and active noise cancelling to those other things. So they'd be well worth getting over the Super Lux if you've got the money. But I will say the Super Lux would probably sound on par with those level of cans. Seriously, for 49 bucks Australian, unbelievable. Next is the JH16 Mark 1. Now this is a custom IEM. Now these would be so much further up the list if they still fit my ears. This is just my list of headphones and these don't fit my ears anymore. So the seal is broken. It lets air get in if I'm singing a high note. Therefore I've had to put comply wraps around them, which makes it annoying. You've got to squash them in, put them in. Once they're in, they're way too dark because of maybe even accentuated by the foam wraps. That adds more bass usually. It does kind of get the seal going, but it still doesn't feel the way that they did when I first got them. Problem is, these molds don't fit my ears anymore, so they're further down. If you get a pair of JH16s from JH Audio, Pro in-ear monitors for stage use or listening, 8 balanced armatures per side. You can get 10 and even more these days. JH make amazing stuff. They've got so many more other models out there. It'd have to be just try it and see what you like the best. But I'm telling you, they are an amazing company. And when I first got those JH16s, it was just a beautiful thing. They fit so beautifully. This is like going back 7-8 years. So now they don't fit. Your ear canals change your entire life. Get bigger, more space. Air gaps. You need a good seal to get a good headphone sound out of custom IEMs. That is paramount. I'll be back in a sec. I've just got to turn off an alarm. Next down the list, this is bizarre, crazy, because it's another IEM. It's an earbud IEM, universal fit, and I've messed around with the types of buds, tips. So this one is the one that comes with the G4 transmitter pack, and the transmitter pack is the pack that obviously you get a body pack goes on your side, you get a transmitter which sends your mix from the live sound, the sound guy, whatever you've got going through there, and it transmits it to the body pack. You stick your IEMs in there when you're on stage playing. There's a stock standard Sennheiser bud that comes with the Sennheiser G4. It's called the IE4. So I don't really know what the value of these things is to buy new, but I think I've seen them for $60, $70 Australian, $60, $70, $80 maybe Australian. Maybe from 50 to 80, I'd say. Cheap for a pair of IEMs. When I first got them, they didn't fit in my ears because of this, the silicone tips. They were very, very soft and just, they didn't create a seal for me, even at all 3 sizes. They've got small, medium, large. None of those fit properly. They'd fall out. If you replace those with foam tips that go squash down, go all the way in and expand in your ears to create that foam seal, you will get a hugely isolated, well-tuned, extremely lightweight, good sounding picture of the music for single driver dynamic earbuds. It is really fantastic. If you want to block out the world, if you want to walk around a shopping centre and, you know, not hear anything outside and just be in your universe, your own little universe, Sennheiser IE4s are almost the second bud that I would suggest, at least on my list, after my Shure 846. They are the next bud down. You don't have the thing about custom IEMs. You don't have the kind of I'm worrying about them in terms of being an expensive thing that I want to take out on tour. They're just, you're probably going to use your own better quality buds for your stage use. So these are just a spare pair that are sitting around, and I've got to say, they sound fucking awesome. They're just a really... When you put foam in, typically the bass increases, and that just helps get these particular buds to that really fun, immersed, I'm just in there. There's been times I've listened to these things and I'm arguing with myself saying, these are kind of like the most bass, like, but not really in that bad a way. Like, they're just mega bass. And it's not a bad thing. It's just like a really, really, it just offsets the sort of amount of treble and mids that they've cooked into the tuning of these things. It's a good combination for me. I really like the Sennheiser IE4 with the foam comply tips. Now, next on the list is the iPhone EarPods. These are the double driver wired version. They sound better to my ears on all levels than the Sennheiser IE4s. And in fact, yeah, they just do to me. But they're further down the list on this particular list than the Sennheiser IE4s because of the lack of option to isolate the outside world. So other people are going to hear a little bit of sound from you. You're not going to be able to drown out as much sound. You're going to have to listen to them louder. You're going to hear more outside noise. If you're walking around in a busy environment, you don't want to get hit by cars, or you're running with them or whatever, and they fit properly, then you might actually enjoy that element because the sound is actually arguably quite strong from these EarPods for a small bud. But that fit and isolation lack of just puts them further down the list for me. So I'm going to say the Sennheiser IE4s I would reach for before I'd get those EarPods out. The EarPods will just sit in my jeans fob pocket, and I just use those if I just need to hear something louder, I'm in a loud place, or I just need to check a quick track that I need to learn, or someone's sending over something they want me to play on or whatever. I'll just have them on me all the time. So they're awesome. But their weakest point for me is the fit. I just can't get them to fit. I never have been able to get them to fit, and they're just plastic. There's no tips that you can change up, so they've painted themselves into a corner for me, unfortunately. Next on the list might even be equal with the iPhone EarPods because I don't think the sound is as good. They're a single driver Audio Technica. They're called the E40. They're a low-end Audio Technica. They've got the form factor and all the attributes with the over-ear wire of a Pro IEM, and they do isolate very, very well outside noise. So they would be fine for stage. But in terms of sound signature, they've got my least favourite sound signature for my Pro IEM style IEMs. Just too scooped, too cooked on the top. It's just tweaked. And then the bass is sort of going for that, let's give them some bass sound, which you can just tell that it's just tuned that way to try and... They're quite clear, and they do remind me of the Audio Technica vibe. I've never been the biggest fan of the M50s, but the AT-M50Xs or whatever they're called, not the biggest fan of those. I do think they fit and feel good. But these IEMs remind me a little bit of that philosophy. It's like a lot of treble, a lot of bass, not much in between, and it's a bit sort of like selling the ecstasy of the sound versus the neutrality and the sort of more evenness of the mids. Mix engineers often say, look, it all starts and ends with the mids. The mids, you got to get that in check first, and that's ironically the stuff that you can reproduce quite easily with a small driver. You don't need a lot of money, or it's like a 50mm lens. You can have a small prime 50mm lens on a camera, and you can still make quite an affordable one look amazing in terms of its output. But these they try too hard in certain other ways sonically for me, and it just misses the mark. That said, they fit brilliantly. I've got to say, everything I've tried with Audio-Technica in terms of the ATM50s and even these Audio-Technica E40 IEMs fits fantastically. Fits probably even as good as the Shure 215s or the 315s. They've got that going for them, and they do block out a lot of noise. And a long cable too. So if you're into long cables, they're good, but they're almost second last or third last on this list out of a shitload of a lineup. Now it's a wild card one. It's the Plantronics Backbeat Fit. Sonically, they're down the bottom, but they're Bluetooth. They're so lightweight and they're sweat resistant. They're the most convenient of all. So if you just literally want to hear, for instance, you're riding your bike and you want to hear directions from Google, or Google Maps or whatever, speaking directions into your ear, or you just want to have some sort of soundtrack going on, and they're the most convenient. They're the lightest. You can wear them with a bike helmet. You can wear them with sunglasses. You forget they're on. You can literally you just turn the music off by hitting them on the side, and then you can just hear the outside world because they don't even block your ears at all. They're designed for running. They're designed for riding bikes. They're designed for doing exercise when you're out, so you don't actually get into dangerous situations with cars and other people knocking into things or other people knocking into you. You can hear things coming. That's the point of them. So they should really, in a way, be way further up the list. They should be like halfway up the list if you're just adding all of the things that they're trying to do. But the sound, because they don't go in your ear, so much air gap. If you're a sound junkie sort of person, audiophile or whatever, or if you're judging mixes on them, you're not going to get the bass response because there's no seal. If you think the AirPods let a lot of outside noise in by Apple, then these let twice as much noise, if not 60, 70, 65% more noise in than even the iPhone AirPods. So in terms of that sound, they come down the bottom of the list. Second bottom. The bottom is the free Scandinavian airline buds that are just given away free on the airlines. Now these, I just put them in because they sound literally like the speaker out of the iPhone without anything plugged in. That's the sound signature, almost. It's zero bass, zero treble. It's only a very small selection of the mids are being recreated. But I put them on the list anyway because they are almost like the ultimate grot box. You wouldn't use them for mixing because they're headphones in general. And these are just so shocking sonically that it's a double whammy. But I've got to say, I put them on here because you've just got to give the Wooden Spoon award out somewhere along the line. These are just ones that they're blue colour, they're small, they're lightweight, they're free. The right ear is actually, it should be labelled left, and the left one should be labelled right because they've even got them switched around and they're incorrect. Anyway, that's the headphone lineup. Now, on the internet, what you're going to hear about any topic is opinions. Now, if I change the ear tips, that a lot of these headphones come with multiple types of ear tips, silicon, this is for earbuds or IEMs, silicon, foam, the little things, there's different sizes that make the seal harder or softer. That is going to change any brand's sound. Some IEMs sound different when your mouth is open than when your mouth is closed. The angle at which an over-ear headphones driver is going into your eardrum and the distance because of the angle of how many clicks down you've had on the actual ear pieces is going to change the sound. So opinions, every person talking about a product being better than another product is only their opinion. And although they say that, I don't see enough importance being placed on the actual variables that go on in terms of even dialing in certain headphones. with the types of changes you can make, i.e. changing the pads, changing the ear tips, changing the source device that you're playing out of. It's going to sound different if you're playing out of a tube amp. It's going to sound different if you're playing out of a different computer output. It's going to sound different if you're playing it out of an iPhone. It's going to sound different if you're going to be playing it out of a high-end audio interface or a digital digital analog converter. Now, here's the other thing no one talks about. Your hearing is different from someone else's hearing. I'm a professional musician. I had my ears tested, and the guy played a lot of sine waves at various volumes, different pitches. When I got out of there, he said, well, you've got the classic musician's hearing loss. Certain hearing loss at a certain high frequency thing, everything else is intact except for the, he says a lot of musicians are suffering from that type of hearing loss that you've had. It was a certain dip. I couldn't hear specific sine waves as well at certain frequencies as others. Now, other people aren't going to have that hearing loss, and other people are going to have worse hearing loss, and your ears are going to have different hearing losses potentially from the left ear to the right ear. You need to factor that in. The fit of an IEM, a custom IEM, the types of tips you're using, that's going to change it a lot. But your hearing and how well your hearing is working. Here's something that you might not have thought of that I definitely know has changed my hearing at times. I was playing a show called The Governor's Ball in New York City with a guy called Mayor Hawthorne. I was on keyboards, and before I went on stage, I had a bunch of hearing go in one of my ears. Now, why was it? Because it was blocked with wax. The reason it was blocked with wax is because I was touring a lot, putting a lot of earplugs in to block out people on planes, I was using in-ear monitors for all of the shows, so it was pushing wax further into the ears. It was, all the different pressure changes of being on aeroplanes. That all built up, so after pushing these things in at the sound check, between the sound check and the gig, I literally lost it felt like 35% of my hearing was gone in one ear, and the other one was completely clear. I had this dude in the medical tent stick saline solution with a sort of ear syringe thing in, and then I had to turn my head to the side and try and get that hunk of wax out. He pulled out a hunk of wax, which was not that big, but it was friggin' large. Now, when I went to that audiologist to get my ears tested, he said, no, one of your ears is almost completely blocked, the other one has a little bit in there. He got a curette, which is that sort of little spatula thing that they put in your ears, and he pulled the wax out. I could hear differently as soon as I was doing that. So the important takeaway from all of this is, and the brain, by the way, after you've had a change in your hearing loss due to these things, it sort of seems to compensate to a certain level. And it's, if you're literally losing whole 30, tens of percent of your hearing, you'll notice it straight away, and it'll be a problem that's ongoing. But if you're only losing 5, 6, 7% of your hearing in one ear due to hearing loss, or both during hearing loss, that is going to change the way that you perceive things like treble, or just the relationship of how boxy a sound is going to be versus how clear a sound is going to be. Even my own hair, if I'm literally trying to judge a mix really well, if I get my own hair and pull it out of the way like that, it changes the sound to enough of a significant point that if I was a mastering engineer, I'd be thinking, you've always got to wear a hat, headband, some sort of way of getting your hair out of your ears, because as soon as I do that, it does change my perception in terms of just the reflection of where the sound's coming from, and it changes the high frequency perception of what I'm hearing. So the reason I made this little added bit to the video is that I basically want to say that I have an issue with people saying that products are better than another product, because all of these variables will impact your own perception. And it's like going to an optometrist. If you've got one eye covered up, one eye, different people have different levels of vision. Different people, have different perceived frequencies that they can actually hear down to or above. So for people to say this item is too trebly, this item is too bassy, this item is, it's that language which I know I've used in my other opinions on talking about my own lineup of headphones, and I've explained that this is better than that, this is better than that, scores higher on a list, and I've done that. But it is actually, again, because of everything I've said in this section of the video, only opinion, and you need to know how flimsy and non-important that opinion is. If you want to hear sound that you enjoy, you are the only person who knows what you want to hear. If you're not a trained musician, you are no less valid than someone who is. If you're an audiophile, the way that someone else perceives sound might seem an inferior in opinion, but if you're thinking that, you are wrong as an audiophile, you are wrong as a musician, you are wrong as a mastering or audio engineer to say that your opinion is a better opinion. It might be trusted by more people. People might buy products based on your opinion more than some other people who are uneducated in certain levels of audio. But if someone is enjoying the sound of something, you need to let them, you need to believe that that's actually what they feel. They may not have gone on the journey that I've gone. They may not have gone on the journey that a hobbyist or a professional audio person has gone on. But at the end of the day, it's only sound. And it's people, I really think the internet is a playground for people to just arrogantly voice their opinion, and it kind of pisses me off when I read reviews between this product and another product, because at the end of the day, if my head is shaped a different way from someone else's head, or I have a specific sensitivity to things being in my ears, or I just don't have as strong a neck and don't like to carry heavy things in my head, or I don't like the clampy nature of something, or my hearing is different from someone else's, then I will choose this product over that product for different reasons than the next person. So I know you can average it all out and say, well, this is the average of the people we tested, but what's the point? I know it sounds nihilistic or something, but at the end of the day, if music is making you feel good through your headphones or through your speakers, if it's having an emotional impact on you in any way and helping you to connect with the music that you're choosing to listen to, then the task is done. It's all that matters. So anyway, thanks for listening, and I did talk about some fantastic headphones in this video, but at the end of the day, I really encourage everybody out there to just get your own opinion and don't believe everything you read and hear on the internet. Go on your own journey, think for yourself, and do listening. It's that discovery, self-discovery, that's unique and personal and specific to you, that is going to give you the greatest results and make you the most sonically happy on your quest for great sound. Anyway, I will catch you at some point, and signing off.